The investor was minutes from arriving when Bradley called an emergency leadership huddle. My stomach tightened as everyone gathered near the conference room. Bradley's face wore that forced corporate smile I'd learned to distrust over 3 years of working under him. "Quick announcement before Mr. Halston arrives," he said, clapping his hands together. "Kyle will be leading the financial division moving forward." The words hit me like cold water. Oh. His lifelong buddy who joined 6 months ago knowing nothing about financial modeling. Kyle smirked from across the room. Everyone's eyes shifted toward me, then quickly away. The air felt thick with awkward silence. Bradley stepped closer, still smiling. "Lena will be stepping back to focus on other projects. Kyle built the model we're presenting today." My throat closed. Built the model. Those were my nights, my weekends, my formulas. Through the glass doors, I saw a black sedan pull up. Mr. Halston stepped out, briefcase in hand. Kyle straightened his tie and reached for the presentation folder. My presentation folder. The slides I'd formatted perfectly were tucked under his arm. I stood frozen as Kyle walked confidently toward the conference room to present my work. My heart pounded so loudly I barely heard Bradley ushering everyone inside. Chairs scraped against the floor. Laptops opened. The projector hummed to life. I moved mechanically to my seat, my mind spinning backward to 2 weeks ago. Bradley had called me into his office late one evening. He'd leaned back in his leather chair, scrolling through my financial model on his computer. "This is exceptional work, Lena," he'd said, nodding slowly. "Truly exceptional." Relief had flooded through me. Finally, recognition. But then he'd paused, his expression shifting. "Don't mention that meeting to anyone, all right? I want to surprise the board." I'd agreed, thinking he meant a promotion announcement. Now I understood. The surprise wasn't for me. It was on me. Kyle clicked to the first slide. The title appeared on the screen in the exact font and color scheme I'd chosen. Even the subtle gradient background was mine. My hands gripped the armrests of my chair. Mr. Halston settled into his seat at the head of the table, eyes sharp and calculating behind wire-rimmed glasses. My mind drifted further back, replaying the last 6 months like a film I'd been too blind to see clearly while living it. Kyle had walked into the office on his first day wearing an expensive suit and an easy confidence. Bradley introduced him during the morning meeting with an arm around his shoulders. "This is Kyle Morrison. We go way back. He's family." Family. The word had felt loaded even then. Kyle knew nothing about financial modeling. He'd asked me during his first week how to use pivot tables. I'd shown him patiently, thinking I was helping a new colleague learn. He started shadowing my work, sitting beside me during analysis sessions, taking notes when I explained margin calculations and sensitivity models. Then small things started happening. In meetings, Kyle would repeat something I'd said earlier, rephrasing it slightly. Bradley would nod approvingly, as if hearing it for the first time. When I'd mentioned it to Bradley privately, he'd waved it off. "You're my most reliable person, Lena. Kyle needs a win. Help him build confidence." So I had. And now Kyle was presenting my work to $1 million investor. Mr. Halston leaned forward, studying the projection screen. Kyle advanced through 3 slides, reading the bullet points I'd written with rehearsed confidence. Then Halston raised his hand. "Pause there a moment." Kyle froze mid-sentence. "This margin sensitivity analysis," Halston said, tapping his pen against his notepad. "How did you calculate the baseline variance here? Walk me through your methodology." The room went silent. Kyle's confident expression cracked. His mouth opened then closed. Sweat began forming on his forehead. "Well, the methodology is standard industry practice," Kyle stammered. "We used the typical formulas." Halston's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Which typical formulas?" Kyle's face flushed red. "The ones that account for market fluctuations and..." He trailed off, completely lost. Every person in the room subconsciously turned toward me. Even though Bradley hadn't introduced me as involved in the model, somehow everyone knew. Bradley jumped in quickly, his voice tight with barely concealed panic. What Kyle means is we used a multi-factor regression approach with weighted variables. Halston's gaze shifted slowly to me. Our eyes met for just a second, but I saw it. Recognition. Understanding. He already knew. 3 weeks ago, I'd worked late finishing quarterly reports. The office was empty and dark except for my desk lamp. Around midnight, I'd gotten up to refill my coffee when I noticed Kyle's office light was still on. Curious, I'd walked toward his door. Through the glass panel, I saw him hunched over his laptop, frantically clicking through files. My files. On the shared drive. I'd pushed the door open. Working late. Kyle had jumped like I'd caught him stealing. His hand slammed his laptop shut so hard I heard the plastic crack. Bradley told me to grab the updated file, he'd said quickly. His voice pitched higher than normal. I haven't uploaded any updates yet, I'd replied slowly. He'd laughed nervously, gathering his things. Must have misunderstood. I'll check with him tomorrow. He'd left within minutes, practically running out. That night I'd gone through the shared drive's version history. Someone had downloaded every iteration of my model. All from Kyle's account. That was the moment I'd realized something was deeply wrong. Now, in the present, Bradley excused himself and Halston for a private conversation. They left the conference room together, and I watched Bradley's shoulders tense as they disappeared down the hallway. A week before the investor meeting, I'd opened the shared model file to make final adjustments. Something felt off immediately. Formulas had been changed. Assumptions I'd carefully documented were missing. The sensitivity analysis tab showed errors. I'd called Kyle over. Did you modify these sections? He'd nodded proudly. Yeah, I improved the layout. Made it cleaner. But these formulas are wrong now, I'd said, pointing at the screen. This would show a 15% error in our projections. Kyle had shrugged. Looks fine to me. Fine. The investor pitch was in 7 days, and our numbers were broken. I'd stayed until 3 in the morning that night, fixing everything. Restoring the formulas. Rebuilding the assumptions. Making sure every calculation was perfect. While I worked alone in the dark office, Kyle posted photos from a downtown bar on social media. Drinks with Bradley. Laughing. Celebrating something I wasn't part of. I'd saved the corrected file and gone home as the sun started rising. Now, Bradley returned from his private conversation with Halston. His face had gone pale, and his usual confident stride looked shaky. Something had clearly gone wrong in that conversation. Bradley pulled me into an empty conference room the moment Halston stepped away to make a phone call. He shut the door firmly and turned to face me. His voice low and controlled but carrying an edge I'd never heard before. Listen carefully, Lena. Do not speak unless Mr. Halston asks you a direct question. The investor needs to see unified leadership. One voice. Kyle's voice. I stared at him, processing what he'd just said. Do you understand? Bradley pressed, stepping closer. This was the first time in 3 years he'd ever spoken to me like this. Like I was a problem to manage instead of a person who'd built his division's entire analytical foundation. I saw it then. The desperation in his eyes. The fear. He was cornered and he knew it. I understand, I said quietly. He exhaled, relief flooding his features. Good. We're almost through this. Just keep your head down. He left the room quickly, smoothing his tie. Moments later, Halston returned from his call. He glanced around the office floor, then spoke to Bradley. I'd like a tour of the operations. And I want Lena to walk with us. Bradley's face twitched. But he forced a smile and nodded. We walked through the operations floor, Halston beside me, Bradley trailing slightly behind. Kyle followed awkwardly, trying to insert himself into the conversation whenever possible. Halston asked questions, simple ones at first, about team structure, about workflow. Then they became more targeted. "This margin model," he said casually as we passed a desk covered in printouts. "How long did the initial build take?" "About 6 weeks of full-time work," I answered honestly. "The data integration was the hardest part. And the sensitivity analysis. 2 weeks. Testing different scenarios to find the most realistic projections." Carl jumped in. "We collaborated closely on that section." Halston didn't acknowledge him. His focus stayed on me. "What software did you use for the regression modeling?" I explained the process step by step. Halston nodded thoughtfully, absorbing every detail. We passed a desk where one of my coworkers had printed a reference sheet. Halston's sharp eyes caught something at the bottom of the page. He paused, bent down slightly, picked up the paper. At the bottom right corner, in tiny gray text, was the document metadata. "Created by L. Carver." My initials. My file. Kyle's face drained of color. Bradley stepped forward aggressively, his voice tight. "That's an outdated version. Kyle rebuilt everything from scratch for the final presentation." Halston studied the paper for a long moment. The timestamp showed it was printed yesterday. Not outdated at all. Without a word, Halston folded the paper carefully and tucked it into his briefcase. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Kyle shifted his weight from foot to foot. Bradley's jaw clenched. Halston simply smiled politely. "Shall we continue the tour?" We walked back toward the conference room. My heart pounded, but I kept my expression neutral. Later that night, alone at home, I remembered something that made my stomach drop. 2 months ago, I'd needed to use Kyle's computer because mine was updating. He'd left his email open. I hadn't meant to snoop, but a draft email caught my eye before I could look away. It was addressed to Bradley. Subject line blank. The body read, "Should I remove her name from the model properties?" I'd closed the laptop immediately, my hands shaking. That was the night I'd started documenting everything. Every email. Every version. Every conversation. I'd created a hidden folder on my personal drive and backed up every piece of evidence. That moment, seeing Kyle's draft email, had changed everything for me. I'd realized this wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. I'd started keeping a detailed log. Dates, times, conversations. I'd forwarded important emails to my personal account. I'd saved screenshots of version histories showing who created what. I'd done it all quietly, never confronting anyone, never making accusations, just collecting facts. I'd also done something else. Something I'd resisted for months. A competitor company had reached out to me 6 months earlier through a recruiter. They'd been impressed by a paper I'd published on financial modeling techniques. They'd wanted an exploratory conversation. I declined because I believed Bradley would finally promote me this year. I believed loyalty mattered. Now I'd opened my laptop and found that recruiter's email buried in my archives. I'd typed a simple message. "Hi, I'm available now. Let's talk." The response came within an hour. "Wonderful. When can we schedule a call?" In the present moment, back in the office after the tour, Halston prepared to leave. He shook hands with Bradley, his expression unreadable. As he walked toward the elevator, he passed close to me. Very quietly, almost a whisper, he said, "Don't leave yet." Bradley intercepted before I could respond to Halston's whisper. He stepped between us, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow in the quiet hallway. "Mr. Halston, Lena's incredibly busy today. I'm happy to handle all investor communications moving forward." Halston looked at Bradley for a long moment. Then he smiled. Not warmly. More like someone watching a slow-motion car crash they couldn't prevent. "Of course," Halston said smoothly. "I'll be in touch." He stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, his eyes met mine one final time. There was something in that look. Understanding. Maybe even respect. The elevator descended. Bradley exhaled heavily and loosened his tie. "That went well," he muttered, though his voice carried doubt. Kyle appeared from the conference room, looking relieved the meeting was over. I returned to my desk and opened my email. Among the usual messages was one from the recruiter. Subject: interview schedule. They wanted to meet. 2 days later, everything started falling apart. Bradley stormed into the office early. His face red, tie already loosened though it wasn't even 9 in the morning. "The board wants to review the numbers themselves," he announced loudly. Everyone froze. The board reviewing numbers directly was unusual. Someone had clearly raised concerns. Carl went pale. His hands trembled as he set down his coffee mug. Bradley paced near his office door, running his hands through his hair. "They want a full presentation. Complete breakdown of assumptions and methodology." He pointed at Kyle. "You're presenting." Kyle's voice cracked. "When?" "Tomorrow. 10 in the morning." I kept my head down, continuing my work like nothing had changed. But inside my heart raced. That afternoon I received an email directly from the board. Not through Bradley. Directly. "Ms. Carver, we'd appreciate your presence at tomorrow's review session. Please prepare to answer technical questions about the financial model." I read it 3 times. They knew. Somehow they knew. That evening I worked late preparing notes. Not because I needed them but because I wanted to be absolutely certain of every detail. Around 8 my phone rang. Unknown number. "Lena Carver." A professional voice asked. "Speaking. This is Patricia from the competitor firm. We'd like to expedite your interview process. Would you be available this week?" I looked around the empty office. At my desk where I'd spent 3 years building something Bradley was erasing. "Yes," I said. "I'm available." The board meeting happened in the largest conference room. Polished wood table. Leather chairs. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. 4 board members sat on one side. Bradley and Kyle sat across from them. I was directed to a seat at the far end. The lead board member, Mr. Desmond, opened a folder. "Let's begin with the baseline assumptions. Kyle, walk us through your methodology." Kyle stood, his hands visibly shaking. He clicked to the first slide and started reading. Word for word. Like he'd memorized a script. After 2 slides, Mr. Desmond interrupted. "Why did you choose a 15% growth assumption for the technology sector?" Kyle blinked. "It's industry standard." "Based on what data?" Silence. "Kyle," Mr. Desmond pressed. "Multiple sources," Kyle said vaguely. Mr. Desmond turned to me. "Ms. Carver, can you explain the 15% assumption?" I spoke clearly. "It's based on 3-year trailing averages from 12 comparable companies, adjusted for market volatility and weighted by revenue size. The full data table is in Appendix C." Mr. Desmond nodded slowly. "And the margin sensitivity model. How did you build that?" I explained the process. Monte Carlo simulations. Stress testing. Variable weighting. Kyle tried to interrupt. "We collaborated on." "I asked Ms. Carver," Mr. Desmond said firmly. Kyle fell silent. For 20 minutes I answered their questions. Only. Professionally. Without bitterness or blame. I explained every assumption. Every formula. Every decision. The board listened intently, taking notes. Finally, the question came that changed everything. "Ms. Carver," another board member asked, "why weren't you presenting to the investor?" The room went silent. Bradley jumped in. "Kyle has been taking leadership of the division. We're developing his strategic presence." "But she built the model," Mr. Desmond stated flatly. "They worked together," Bradley insisted. Mr. Desmond opened his laptop and turned it toward Bradley. "This is the file history from our shared server. Every version of this model originates from Ms. Carver's account. The first file was created 14 months ago. Kyle joined the company 6 months ago." Bradley's face went red. "There's context you're not." "Let him speak," another board member said, gesturing to Kyle. Kyle looked trapped. "Bradley asked me to present because investors respond better to male leadership." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Bradley's eyes went wide. That's not what Kyle don't. You said exactly that, Kyle snapped back, his composure finally breaking. The room erupted. Not with shouting, but with the cold, controlled chaos of corporate warfare. Bradley tried to blame Kyle. Kyle blamed Bradley. Their stories contradicted each other within minutes. You told me to take credit, Kyle said. I told you to lead the presentation, not steal the work, Bradley shot back. You said she wasn't leadership material. I never said that. You said it in your office last month. I heard you tell someone on the phone. The board watched silently, like scientists observing a chemical reaction. I sat perfectly still. The most powerful position in the room was silence. Let them destroy themselves. Mr. Desmond finally raised his hand. Enough. Both men stopped talking immediately. We're ordering an internal audit of this entire project, Mr. Desmond announced. Timeline, contributions, communications. Everything. Bradley's face went white. That's not necessary. This is a simple miscommunication. It's already decided, Mr. Desmond said firmly. He turned to me. Ms. Carver, you're free to go. We'll be in touch. I stood, gathered my things and walked out. Behind me, I heard Bradley's voice rising in desperate explanation. The door closed, muting his words. That night, I remembered something I'd almost forgotten. A small decision that now felt huge. 3 months ago, I'd sent Bradley the final version of the model. But I'd also CC'd the board liaison. Just for transparency, I'd written in the email. Bradley had called me immediately. Why did you copy the board? Standard practice for investor materials, I'd said innocently. He hadn't argued further. Now I understood. That single email created a paper trail the board could follow. They'd seen my name. They'd seen my work. They'd known all along who built what. The audit took 3 days. On day 4, I received a call from Mr. Desmond's assistant. The audit is complete. Results showed definitively that you created every component of the financial model. Kyle contributed formatting on 2 slides. What happens now? Yes. The board is meeting this afternoon. We'll be in contact. That same day something else happened. Mr. Holston appeared at the office unannounced. He didn't schedule a meeting. He simply walked in and asked the receptionist, "Where is Lena Carver?" Bradley tried to intercept. "Mr. Holston, I didn't know you were coming. Let me." Holston raised his hand. "This is between Ms. Carver and me." He walked to my desk. "Do you have a few minutes?" We sat in the conference room. Holston closed the door and settled into the chair across from me. His expression was serious but not unkind. "Tell me everything from the beginning," he said quietly. So I did. I told him about training Kyle. About the late nights fixing his mistakes. About finding him accessing my files. About Bradley's instructions to stay silent during the investor meeting. I didn't embellish. I didn't dramatize. I just stated facts. Holston listened without interrupting. Occasionally he nodded. His eyes stayed fixed on mine, absorbing every word. When I finished, silence filled the room for a long moment. Finally Holston spoke. "I suspected as much during the presentation. Kyle couldn't answer basic questions about his own supposed work. That's impossible if you truly built something." He leaned back. "I've been investing for 30 years. I've seen every trick. But watching someone take credit for another person's work in real time." He shook his head. "That was a new level of shameless. What happens now?" Yes. Holston studied me carefully. "What do you want, Lena?" The question caught me off guard. No one had asked me that in years. "I want to work somewhere my contributions matter," I said finally. Holston nodded slowly. "Then you should leave this place. You're carrying people who are only pulling you down." Holston stood, extending his hand. "Thank you for your integrity. That's rare." We shook hands. He walked toward the door then paused. "One more thing. My investment decision depends on leadership I can trust. Right now I don't see that here." He left without another word. I sat alone in the conference room, processing what had just happened. The next morning the company-wide email arrived. Brief. Corporate. Cold. Effective immediately. Our investment discussions with Holston Capital are paused indefinitely pending internal review. Paused indefinitely. Corporate speak for dead. Bradley's office door stayed closed all morning. Voices carried through the walls. Angry. Desperate. Around noon HR sent another email. Kyle Morrison has resigned effective immediately to pursue other opportunities. I read it twice. Kyle was gone. But I knew this wasn't over. That afternoon Bradley appeared at my desk. His face looked like he hadn't slept. His tie was crooked. His confident swagger had evaporated. "Lena," he said quietly, "can we talk in my office?" Followed him inside. He closed the door and sank into his chair like a deflated balloon. "I need your help fixing this," he said. "Just until we get another investor interested. Then we can discuss your future here properly." I looked at him. Really looked. This was the man who'd watched me work until 3 in the morning and gave someone else credit. Who'd told me to stay silent while my work was stolen. "That's not my responsibility anymore," I said calmly. Bradley's face shifted through several emotions. Anger. Desperation. "Lena, please. Be reasonable." "I've been reasonable for 3 years," I replied. "I'm choosing differently now." I walked out of his office. That week, I interviewed with the competitor company. 3 rounds. Different executives each time. They asked technical questions. I answered easily. They asked about my experience. I explained my work honestly. At the end of the final interview, the VP of Finance smiled. "We'd like to offer you a position. Senior Financial Analyst. 20% salary increase. Full project autonomy." I didn't hesitate. "I accept." They sent the offer letter that evening. I signed it immediately. Then I opened a blank email and began drafting my resignation. "Dear Bradley, I am resigning from my position effective 2 weeks from today. Thank you for the opportunity. Lena Carver." Short. Professional. Final. My finger hovered over the send button. My phone rang. Unknown number. "Ms. Carver. This is Gerald Holston." My breath caught. The investor himself. "I wanted to inform you personally," he said. "I've spoken with your new employer. I recommended you strongly. They're lucky to have you." I couldn't speak for a moment. "Thank you," I finally managed. "No, thank you. For maintaining your integrity when others didn't. That matters more than people realize." We said goodbye. I hung up and stared at my resignation email. Then I hit send. Bradley appeared at my desk 7 minutes later. He must have been watching his email obsessively. "You can't leave," he said, his voice strained. "Not now. The deal depends on you. The board is reconsidering if we can show stability." I looked up at him calmly. Years of swallowed frustration, ignored contributions, and stolen credit melted away like ice in the sun. "The deal depends on competent leadership," I said quietly. "That's not my responsibility to provide." "Lena, please. I gave you 3 years, Bradley. You chose Kyle over me repeatedly. You made your decision. Now I'm making mine." His face crumbled. For the first time he looked genuinely shaken. Not angry. Not calculating. Just lost. "What do you want?" he asked desperately. "A raise. Title. Your own office. I want to work somewhere I'm valued before I prove myself, not after I leave." I returned to my work. Bradley stood there for another moment, then walked away slowly. 2 weeks passed quickly. Coworkers stopped by my desk constantly. Some congratulated me. Others quietly admitted they'd known the truth all along. "We saw you working late every night," one analyst said. "We knew Kyle didn't build that model. Why didn't anyone say anything?" Yes. She looked uncomfortable. "We were afraid. Bradley and Kyle were close. Speaking up felt dangerous." "Understood." Fear keeps people silent more than loyalty ever could. On my last day, people lined up to say goodbye. Some hugged me. Others shook my hand. Few slipped me their personal contact information. "Let me know if your new company is hiring," one woman whispered. Packed my desk slowly. 3 years condensed into one cardboard box. Photos. Mug. My favorite pen. Not much to show for all that time. As I carried the box toward the elevator, I passed Bradley's office. The door was open. He sat at his desk, staring at his computer screen. He looked smaller somehow. Diminished. Our eyes met briefly. He didn't speak. Neither did I. Kyle's desk sat empty, already cleaned out. A new nameplate waited on the edge, ready for whoever came next. The office felt hollow. Like a building after everyone's evacuated, but before anyone realizes what's been lost. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button. As the doors closed, I saw the operations floor one last time. People at desk, phones ringing, work continuing like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. My phone buzzed. Text from my new employer. "Welcome aboard. See you Monday. Excited to have you on the team." Smiled. A real smile. The first genuine one I'd felt in months. My first week at the new company felt surreal. People listened when I spoke. My ideas were credited to me. When I stayed late to finish a project, my manager thanked me personally. "You don't have to work weekends," she said. "We value work-life balance here." Felt like a different world. The second week, I built a financial projection model for a client pitch. I presented it to the executive team. They asked questions. Answered. They approved the approach. No one took credit. No one undermined me. No one told me to stay quiet. After the meeting, the CFO pulled me aside. "That was excellent work. Exactly what we needed." Simple words. But they meant everything. 3 weeks into the new job, I received an email from Mr. Holston. Subject. Following up. "Lena, I wanted you to know I've redirected my investment toward your new company. I've been impressed by their leadership structure and, frankly, by knowing they had the wisdom to hire you. Looking forward to working together in this new capacity. Best, Gerald Holston." I read the email 3 times. The investor had followed me. Not the fancy presentation. Not the corporate reputation. Me. I forwarded the email to my manager. She called me immediately. "This is incredible," she said. "Do you understand what this means?" I did. It meant integrity mattered. Competence mattered. The truth always surfaced eventually. That evening, I sat in my new apartment, looking out at the city lights. Everything felt different now. Not just my job, but something deeper. For 3 years, I'd believed I needed to prove myself. To work harder. To stay longer. To be indispensable. But Bradley had taught me something unexpected. Being indispensable to the wrong people just makes you trapped. Walking away had been terrifying. But staying would have been worse. My phone buzzed. A LinkedIn notification. Someone from my old company had endorsed my skills. Then another. Then another. Opened the app. 5 people from the old office had endorsed me in the past hour. A message appeared from one of them. "Things fell apart after you left. New investor pulled out completely. Bradley's on thin ice. Just wanted you to know we always knew you built everything. Sorry we didn't speak up sooner." I typed a simple reply. "Thank you. I appreciate that." I didn't need vindication anymore. But it felt good to know I hadn't imagined what happened. Another message popped up. This one from Kyle. "Lena, I know I messed up. Bradley pressured me to take credit, but I should have refused. Sorry. I'm working on being better." I stared at the message for a long time. Finally I typed, "Good luck with that." Short. Not warm but not cruel. Just acknowledgement. Some bridges burn. Some people learn. Both can be true. A month later, my manager called me into her office. I walked in nervously, old habits still lingering. "Sit down," she said, smiling. The Holston Capital deal closed yesterday. Full investment. They specifically cited our analytical capabilities as a key factor. Pause. Your analytical capabilities. My chest tightened with emotion I hadn't expected. We'd like to promote you to lead financial strategist. Your own team. Full autonomy on project selection. I couldn't speak for a moment. Is that a yes? She asked gently. Yes, I managed. Definitely yes. That weekend I allowed myself to reflect on everything. The late nights. The stolen credit. The humiliation. The fear of leaving. The courage it took to walk away. People think revenge is loud. Dramatic confrontations. Public callouts. Burning bridges. But real revenge is quieter. It's building something better somewhere else. It's succeeding without needing to prove someone else wrong. It's letting the truth do its work while you move forward. I never sabotaged Bradley. I never exposed him publicly. I never badmouthed the company. I simply stopped enabling dysfunction. I stopped accepting less than I deserved. I stopped waiting for permission to value myself. And somehow that was enough. 6 months after I left, I ran into someone from the old company at a coffee shop. We chatted briefly. How's Bradley doing? I asked, more out of curiosity than concern. She grimaced. Not great. The board replaced him 3 months ago. Cal never came back. They hired someone from outside to rebuild the division. I nodded slowly. That's hard. It was necessary, she said. Things were broken. Everyone knew it. But no one wanted to admit it until you left and everything collapsed. We said goodbye. As I walked back to my office, I thought about Bradley. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt something quieter. Sad maybe. Not for me, but for what could have been if he'd chosen differently. Back at my desk, I opened my current project. A new financial model for an expansion strategy. Complex, challenging, important work. My team was meeting in an hour to review progress. My team. People I'd hired. People I trusted. My phone buzzed. A message from Mr. Holston. Quick question on the Q3 projections. Can you call when you have a moment? Smiled. A year ago, I wasn't allowed to speak to investors. Now they contacted me directly. Justice isn't always loud. It's not always immediate. It doesn't always look like courtroom dramas or public vindication. Sometimes justice is simply this. Waking up and realizing you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Not because someone finally recognized you, but because you finally recognized yourself. I picked up my phone and called Mr. Holston back. Hi Gerald, it's Lena. Let's talk about those projections. The world felt right again. Not perfect. Not dramatic. Just right. And that was more than enough.